So under glorious conditions here at Snetterton, we now will turn our attentions to the second of our two Radical Club Cup races. The champion will be crowned come the end of this race that we're about to see. Colin Miller and Jonathan Wright sit there on the front row of the grid with Darren Luke and Paul Steele on the second row. The car that won the first race won't be starting this one. Tom Ashton and Gary Kane. There's a great start from Darren Luke from the second row of the grid as they head up towards Ritchie's for the first time. It looks as though it's the man from Northern Ireland, from Ballymena, Colin Miller, that leads the race. Darren Luke and Jonathan Wright fighting over second place as they turn their way through Ritchie's. There goes car number 13. That's the car in the hands of Simon Garmston. We're right on board once more with Jonathan Wright. Can't quite find his way through and past Darren Luke. So Colin Miller it is in the red car that leads. Darren Luke in second place. This car we ride on board with is third. The man from Cambridge, the reigning Radical Club Cup champion, will be keen to try and make it 2 championships in consecutive years. He's having a nibble at the heels of Darren Luke on the run down towards the S's. Not close enough, however, was Jonathan Wright. It looks as though it's Nigel Place that sits there in fourth position as we ride on board once more with Charles Loughran. Car that retired from the first race will try and thread his way up and through the order. He's behind Simon Garmston at the moment at the wheel of one of the Radical Club Sports. There goes number 70. That's David Thornburn. He is currently residing towards the very bottom of the top 10. As we now turn our attentions back to the lead battle, Colin Miller, Darren Luke and Jonathan Wright. Jonathan Wright has had to replace his engine for this race. We saw the car fail over the start-finish line after the first race. He's got his less powerful engine in for this one, so he's having to work even harder to try and hang on to those two ahead, that being Colin Miller and Darren Luke. There goes Jonathan Wright in third position. He's got a championship to think about, as has Colin Miller. Both of them remarkably close in terms of championship points coming into this weekend. And as they head down the Revit straight, top 3 still remain as they were, with Nigel Place sitting there in fourth position. Very long straight indeed, the Revit straight. The opportunity for Darren Luke and Jonathan Wright to try and slipstream those cars ahead and gain an advantage if at all they can. And then heavy onto the brakes and into the left and right flips at the S's. Top 3 keeping each other fairly honest as they come through the bomb hole. Daunting right-hander, followed by the very, very fast, flat-out right-hander at Corham, and then onto the brakes once more for Russell. As Darren Luke this time shows the nose of the car to Colin Miller. For the first time, Darren Luke has showed his hand somewhat. He's keen to try and take the lead of the race, a man that's long overdue a race win in the 2009 Radical Club Cup. And right on board once more with Charles Loughran, as there's problems there and a spin for one of the Radical SR3s. Further down through the field, it looks as though it's Steve Burgess that's just recovering. There's also a spin and problems for car number 26. That is the club class car in the hands of Mark Boot. Looks as though he is clambered out of the car and therefore will take no further part in the race. And here is Charles Loughran. He's still threading his way up through the field. The man who started down in 21st position on the grid. He's just gone ahead of the Bi-Duro class leading car. There it is, the buff-coloured car in the hands of Rachel Davis. So Charles Loughran is now up inside the top 10. Darren Luke, however, still sitting there in second place, still trying to stay as close as possible into the wheel tracks of our race leader, Colin Miller. Colin Miller, who at the beginning of the season was just trying to learn the circuits. They're going through and past Ian Charles, who's at the wheel of one of the Radical Club Sports. Through they go either side. There's contact as well between Colin Miller and Darren Luke. That was all as a result of both of them trying to pass Ian Charles in the Radical Club Sport at exactly the same time. Thankfully, they've both continued and will now come down the centre straight side by side once more. The red car of Colin Miller on the left-hand side of the circuit retakes the lead of the race again once more. Darren Luke has to slot back through into second position. All over the curbs at the Russell chicane goes David Thornburn. He points to one side and allows Richard Stables to retake the position. As a very sideways Darren Luke comes out of Sear corner. Perhaps that contact with Colin Miller has caused a slight problem to that car, because all of a sudden the rear end started to try and break loose on Darren Luke, and now he's beginning to fall away from the race leader. Once more we're on board with Charles Loughran. He is still trying to make his way up through the order. Paul McLuhan, I think it is, it's ahead of us. Down the Revit straight they go. Both of them Radical SR3s, therefore they're both powered by the 1500cc Suzuki engine that produces approximately 250 brake horsepower into the braking area for the S's. And up towards the bomb hole once more. Charles Loughran, as yet, hasn't managed to find his way through. Here comes Jonathan Wright in what is a fairly distant third position currently. He's coming up to try and put a lap on the Club Sport class car in the hands of John Morris. Through he goes, so Jonathan Wright dispenses with the back marker Lappery. Here's the fight between Paul McLuhan and Charles Loughran. Charles Loughran still not having found his way through as yet. Race leader is still though Colin Miller, pressing on in the lead of the race. As down the straight towards us comes Paul McLuhan, still with Charles Loughran snapping at his heels. Gary Baxter in the second of the two red and white cars. Another SR3 sits not that far away as well. And there's problems for Darren Luke. Clearly that contact may have had consequences, because Darren Luke, car number 7, is out of the car. And what's that going to do to the championship points? Because it will promote Jonathan Wright by a position, and those extra few points for gaining that position might prove crucial at the end of this. There goes Richard Stables and David Thornburn still fighting away. And here is the replay of the contact between Colin Miller, leading the race, and Darren Luke. There's the back marker of Ian Charles. Through to the left-hand side goes Colin Miller, the right-hand side Darren Luke, and then there's just the briefest of contact between the two of them. Darren Luke taking the lead of the race in the process, Colin Miller fighting back, and Colin Miller for the moment the only car that's continued. There is David Thornburn. He is still fighting over that position with Richard Stables. Richard Stables in the Pro Sport class, David Thornburn in the Super Sports class, Colin Miller in the tuned class it is that leads overall. As out of Sear Corner now comes David Thornburn. You can see the number 95 car, predominantly black with its red flashes, in the hands of Richard Stables. Ahead of him, Richard Stables leading the Pro Sport class as well at this stage. The car that's ahead of those two is car number 20 in the hands of Simon Fish. Down into the braking area for the S's once more. This is the battle for 5th and 6th position. Here's Charles Loughran, our onboard camera car once more. The man from 21st on the grid has now managed to climb up to 7th position. As car number 22, that's the car in the hands of Gary Baxter, has managed now to get himself ahead of the very similarly liveried car in the hands of Paul McLuhan. Through those two come round through the bomb hole. Car number 22 now ahead of 21. Baxter ahead of McLuhan. See just how glorious the weather has been here this weekend. The grass looking very yellow indeed. Here is our Bajoro class leader, car number 55, Rachel Davis. She's being borne down on by Jonathan Wright, who's now up into 2nd place as a result of that retirement for Darren Luke. Through the S's he makes his way, and it looks as though there's problems for James Breckle towards the end of the race. He pulls the rather warm-looking Radical SR4 off and into retirement, as over the start-finish line and onto the final lap now comes Colin Miller. If the positions remain the way they are, Colin Miller will take the championship, and by a very slender margin indeed. Charles Loughran is still trying to thread his way up the order as well. He's had a very, very busy race following his retirement in the first race. Started 21st on the grid. He's got himself up inside the top 7 now and is trying to gain further places if he can. You can see just how busy he's being kept by the back markers. All over the curbs he goes in avoidance of Simon Garmston, car number 13. Simon, who currently resides down in 2nd position in the Club Sport class, is now going to be lapped by Charles Loughran. But you can see how much time Loughran lost. Through comes Colin Miller, through the bomb hole for the final time, up towards Coram, just the braking area for Russell to go. And the man who at the beginning of the 2009 season was just in this championship to try and learn the tracks and get a little bit quicker is poised to take that very championship. Out of Russell he comes up towards the checkered flag, which is going to fly for the very final time in the 2009 Radical Club Cup. It is Colin Miller that wins the race and will win the championship as a result of that. He will be absolutely ecstatic, as will be the boys at Transpower who prepare this car. He claims the honours from Jonathan Wright in 2nd place. Nigel Place gains his first podium of the season, with Simon Fish, Richard Stables and David Thornburn completing the top 6. While on the podium we can see Colin Miller standing aloft with a garland around his neck and getting a soaking from Jonathan Wright and Nigel Place. There's the confirmation. Colin Miller wins the championship by a slender 2 points from Jonathan Wright, with Simon Fish, Mark Boot and Rachel Davis winning their respective classes.
I pushed all the way to the checkered flag and not much more I could have done. Winning the race fastest lap, so that's as good as it gets.
And a titanic struggle with Darren Luke there.
Yeah, Darren was pushing hard at the very start there. I was taking my tyres a wee while coming in, but just one of these moves that went wrong for Darren, so hard luck.
The last 3 meetings have been so frantic. When we lost the engine today, it was just I didn't know what to think. And my guys and Radical Powertech worked really well and put another engine in. It was a standard engine, but I knew I was going to have to work really hard, and that's what we've done, and it's worked. It's paid off.